Hey, thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much. It's really great to be here, talking to FOSS backstage and listening this morning to the exciting and almost scary challenges ahead of us. The topic that we want to talk to you today is something that really builds on the discussions so far. This is an initiative that comes from a compliance background, but really we're looking at how do we move beyond thinking about mere compliance to understanding how we measure and improve and strive towards excellence in terms of how we're managing all of our open source capabilities in the face of all those challenges that we face. Today, there should have been three of us here today. My colleague Andrew Katz, who some of you probably know, was caught up in the industrial action at the airport, so he couldn't quite make it today, but he will be here tomorrow if you wanted to catch up with Andrew. But this work that we're about to talk about today comes from the OpenChain project, and it's something that's brought us, Orkro, and Deloitte together, working on this Linux Foundation project. Orkro is an open source compliance advisory with a very long standing record of partnering with the OpenChain project and a background in legal and technical advisory. Myself, I'm an engineer by training, and I have worked much more closely in the end of my latter stages of my career on this question of how do we really achieve complex aims to fulfill our strategy. Sascha, did you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Sascha Pudenz. I'm working for Deloitte in Germany, which is a big professional service company, which you might have heard of. My main focus is actually on SAM and FOSS, and we are providing advisories to our clients and organizations to be more compliant when it comes to licensing perspectives of open source software. And I'm happy also to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sascha. So this is what we're going to look at today. I'll quickly go through an introduction to what the OpenChain project is and what that work is all about, and then in particular the work that we're doing in the Education Workgroup, which is what has really put all of this initiative together. So we'll then look on, well, why did we start looking at capability assessment methodologies and move to the model that we've released and is available and is out there. It's an open source model, so we'll tell you where to find that. And then the last part of our sort of conversation today really is a request for collaboration, because we'd like to see where else we can take this kind of thinking and methodology. And we're keen to work with people who would like to try it out on their project and give us feedback and see if there are other ways that can help them move forward and develop their own management. So taking a look at the OpenChain project itself. This is a Linux Foundation project and is nothing to do with blockchain. The chain is all about supply chain. And it doesn't produce software, but it focuses really on how do we build trust in the supply chain? How do we do that for software that includes open source components? And there is a significant number of companies and open source projects that have announced OpenChain compliance in their programs, thousands in many industries who are particularly challenged with this question of how do we think about quality, trust, transparency across a supply chain of heavily interconnected projects. So this is not just about how one project works, it's also how it connects to and builds trust and transparency with other projects through a supply chain. And these are the principles that the OpenChain project was built upon. And their mission now is to maintain two core standards. So the ISO 50230, that's the international standard for open source license compliance, and is the fundamental building block of the capability model that we'll be talking about today. And of course, 18974 is all about how you offer security assurance across a complex supply chain. And in the Education Workgroup that Andrew chairs, the focus of that group really is on bringing materials that help people understand the challenge and also just fast track getting up to speed, working with and implementing these kind of approaches, building on the experience of others rather than having to reinvent the wheel. And if you look at the OpenChain site, hopefully you'll find a whole bunch of material in terms of explainers and videos and other education material and then, of course, this capability model we're going to talk about today. And if you'd like to know more, please do join in. You don't have to be a member of the project to participate. You can subscribe and take part in what is actually a very active project looking at a wide range of topics. Sascha, over to you.
All right, maybe just one question. Who has actually heard already of this ISO standard? 52.3. Okay, they are carrying some hands up. That's great, Kate. How many of you have actually done an assessment for your organization, whether you're compliant or not? Okay, less hands, but still there are some. Okay. When you're talking and looking on ISO standards, there's one advantage, but also in the same page it's a disadvantage. The question is also often whether it's a yes or no, whether you are compliant or you're not compliant. So in specific questions, there's no in between. So it's a black-white world. And basically, when we have thought about this topic in the Linux Foundation, in the OpenChain project, we said that's quite hard for companies to understand where they are currently at, because it raises some questions, this black-white thinking. So, Stephen, can you just show up the question? So, when we have talked to organizations in those assessments, naturally questions popped up like, how do I actually get from a no to yes? Is there some kind of guidance? Because in ISO standards, just saying what you have to fulfill, it's not giving you any guidance how you can come there. Second question would be, yes, I'm actually compliant with this requirement you have put in this ISO standard. And what is next? What comes beyond? What can I do more beyond this actual ISO standard? And that's where we try to change something or black-white world to actually bring some more colors in there. So to say, actually there's more below a yes, so there's something before you're actually getting to the yes, and there's even some more aspects that you can do if you're already compliant with something. So we developed this framework as part of the OpenChain to say how mature is actually a company when it comes to those specific requirements from the policy itself. And basically, Stephen will also talk about a bit more about those stages. You can see over here where there's already some insights. We prepared this framework with 5 stages you can be in, from initial, repeatable, defined, managed, and optimizing. And of course, you have some kind of yes stage, which would be defined then. But there are some stages before and some stages after that. When you're doing an assessment based on such a framework with more colors in there, you can basically get answers to specific questions, like you get more transparency on gaps. So where I'm currently at, where do I want to be in the future, and how could I come there, go there. Also, it let you decide as an organization what is a desirable state for you, because you don't have to be on the highest optimizing stage for every requirement, because as higher you come, it gets more expensive. So it can be totally okay to say, okay, I would like to be compliant, I want to be on defined stage for this specific requirement. For other one, I want to be on optimized level because it's quite important for my organization. And furthermore, also this framework gives more examples and providing therefore guidance. What is the natural next steps? What can be implemented to take the next step there? So that's the framework we have developed to be beyond compliant itself. There are also some other aspects for organizations that can be asked and also are interesting when it comes to provide more documentation. So for example, you can share best practices. You can also focus on operational excellence. What is quite interesting when you want to get some internal funding is to build an actual business case, because that's what managers want to see, to be honest. You can also raise performance in different teams, so you can compare teams. You can also raise their performance by providing more guidance and best practices there. Also work with new technologies, and also this framework and assessment method can be used in M&A projects, because you can not just see it's a yes or no, you can see where they are actually at, how mature is it, how helpful may it be, is it actually value creating already? So these kind of stages can be seen there. So there are different aspects why such an assessment method is quite helpful.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Sascha. So what we'll do now is move on to the model itself. But just from the show of hands, the people who are sort of familiar with 5230, you'll know that the people that sort of developed it and designed it wanted it to be scalable as possible. So something that would be light touch but scalable. So it's quite an artful way in which they've done that. So the capability model is designed to also stretch in that same way. So the standard can be applied very quickly to a small startup, or it could be applied quite rigorously and extensively to a 300,000 strong organization in the same way. So the principles and structure in the standard itself are really scalable and really very well designed. So the model, capability model, builds on that kind of structure and principles. And if you are familiar with the specification, you might recognize the numbers. I don't expect you to read the text in the black boxes. We'll take a look in a minute at some of the layers. But what I want to do is just sort of lay out the way in which the work that has been done, because we talked to lots of organizations who have implemented the 5230 specification for their programs and for their organizations. And a sort of structure emerged, which wasn't necessarily inherent to the specification, which is the structure you can see in the 3 layers, which look at governance, strategy, and oversight, enablement and performance management in the middle, and the bottom layer there is all about the technical delivery of, okay, how do we actually work within the technical framework that we need to be able to do that. And that structure is in the model. So if I move on a bit more, so in that governance, strategy, and oversight layer, this is where you really get into the detail of, okay, well, do we have the right policies in place? And are those policies properly integrated with our own corporate governance framework and our own corporate governance approach? And are those policies being monitored and tracked? The area of, okay, well, program scope, what does this mean? So this can mean, well, where are we choosing to apply where we need to focus? So there may be instances where you want just a particular product line or a particular team to be compliant, or you may be taking a view that our whole operation and our whole enterprise needs to fall within the program scope. So this is the area where you really clarify that. And then under contributions, this is a really key element of, yes, both how are we ingesting, how are we taking on board all of the different components which may come from a open source community, and what do we think are allowable licenses that we want to work with, and what are the particular projects that we think are the particular standard and quality that we think should be working with. But also, what role are we playing in contributing back upstream? How do we want to do that? Are we working well with our colleagues and peers across the ecosystem in terms of playing our part in maintaining? And this one particularly is going to be a key area, as we were hearing this morning from Mirko and also from Jutta, in terms of the need to really have investment and contribution and strength in the structure, in the way in which we are thinking of the whole ecosystem and its sustainability. And then finally, over what period of time do we want to conform, and how are we going to make sure we're certified ourselves or satisfied ourselves that we are conforming? And that's what the governance, strategy, and oversight layer really looks at. Then moving into the middle layer, these are things that we're saying, okay, well, what are we doing to actually set ourselves up to be successful? Have we thought about, I'll move to awareness first, so have we thought about the way in which we are communicating and working with everyone across the project or everyone within our organization? We just saw a fantastic presentation by the Siemens team who talked about their inner source program and the communication and engagement that they invested in to bring tens of thousands of developers out into the open, if you like, to work with them on an inner source program. What kind of communication and engagement program is required around awareness? What do we need to do around awareness around our wider supply chain or our other partners or parties that we're working with across the ecosystem? So all of these things need to be thought of. Do we have effective resourcing? This goes beyond, do we have an OSPO? This looks at, okay, have we given the engineering team the right amount of time and resource to be able to work successfully in this area of open source management? Do we have the right leadership and management engaged in this question? Are they given the time and the training to be able to fulfill this role? So these are other questions. And then that moves you to the question of competence. So looking at, yes, training, but going beyond that, have we thought about, well, if someone's given an accountability of signing off SBOMs, how are we making sure that they are properly trained and given the support, and also it fits into their own role definition and the way in which they are held to account in the organization, but also supported in their role in providing SBOMs. So this middle layer asks us those questions. And if I move back to the access box, that's a particular part of the OpenChain specification, which deals with how well do we handle questions or challenges from outside where people ask us, are we sticking to our open source principles? Are we compliant? Are we managing the artifacts appropriately? And if someone has a challenge, is that challenge being managed anonymously? And are we taking that challenge and approach seriously and with support? And then finally, the OpenChain delivery layer. This is where the question of how good are we at actually running a good DevOps cycle that has all of the elements of license compliance and open source management built within it. So interesting, there's been I was at FOSS-Dem, and some interesting conversations about, well, do you really need a bill of materials if you provide all the source code and the build scripts, then surely you don't need to give someone a bill of materials. Well, bill of materials has been in the OpenChain specification for a very long time, and there's been a clear commitment and dedication to working with SBOMs and the like, and going beyond that. Now we're looking at, okay, well, is there a way of understanding the quality of our SBOMs? Do we have metrics in place? Do we know how we're going to improve and add to the quality of our bill of materials? And then those boxes around license obligations and license compliance. How well are we really tooled up to understand the incoming licenses? And are we actively managing them in the development process? And are we handling any kind of compliance challenges or issues on the way we go through? And finally, are we publishing and producing all the artifacts and storing them in the right way? So that's a rapid walk through the capability model. And as Sascha was saying, you can take a look at, okay, well, how well are we doing against some of those capabilities? And the way in which we've set the scoring around this is that if you're compliant with an open source program, you're likely to be at level 3. But you may well be of a size or a scale, or you may be wanting to manage risk or complexity, which means we really need to turn certain aspects of our capability up to level 4 or level 5. And if you're actually wanting to provide leadership and to be seen to be, I would argue, a leading proponent in open source across a community and a supply chain, you really should be thinking about level 4 or level 5 across the board. But as Sascha said, the idea behind this model is you can choose yourself. Where are we today? We may be at level 1, level 2 in some areas, and next 18 months, we know we want to build to get to level 3. So this is where the tool can begin to give you an insight into how you can do some road mapping for development.
So to get it more hands-on mentality in here, so we have talked about the framework, and what we have brought now to you is basically one example requirement. So as Stephen has described, the ISO standard consists of a lot of requirements you have to fulfill and basically be compliant or not compliant. Here you can see one example. It's an extract from the policy. You can see at the beginning here, the first column, it's just one example. Basically, it requires you to provide a visible method to any third parties to make open source license compliance inquiries. So, for example, to provide an email on a specific website where developers can reach out to you and ask for an inquiry regarding open source compliance of your organization. So that's the requirement. And what you can see on the red angle in the middle is this define stage. And that's basically written directly in the policy. So that's the requirement the policy is giving you. You have to say there's a specific section of the company website which provides contact details for open source queries. If you have this, you are compliant with the ISO. And that's basically the point where we said, okay, there's something before that. So you can see initial stage, for example, that your company has some kind of general awareness that there's a contact person required to answer actually inquiries. However, that's not still the stage of fulfilling an ISO standard, but it's the initial part there. Secondly, repeatable means the go-to person answers those questions. You have a dedicated contact email address already in place. However, it may not be published on the right point, or it's not published on the right side. Then we have the define stage, already talked about this. And then we are coming to things that are more tending to be on a regular basis, KPI-driven things, improving more. Yeah, so that's the managed states. You're handling and you're checking on a regular basis whether everything is reachable, whether the person is still in place, whether roles and responsibilities are clear. You have maybe set up some KPIs, so how many inquiries are coming in, what's the time to response, for example, could be KPIs here. An optimizing stage would be then handling on those insights. So you're not just monitoring, you're handling now. So you're addressing with your strategy how maybe I need an additional person to answer those questions. Maybe I need a self-service option I could implement here. So that's already coming to more automations and optimizing things. And that's basically one example from one requirement. And we have provided those things for all the requirements that are essential for the ISO standard.
Okay, so what we'll do now is move on to a bit, well, how might I actually use this? And how might I communicate what we're up to? So one of the things behind the thinking as an education group, we wanted to establish a tool that would enable people to get to the heart of the conversation, rather than having to explain everything all at once and move on to say, well, what we need to do today or tomorrow are these three things. Because if you think about it, the specification has 12 areas of things that you might need to do, and if you think about the capabilities inside those 12 boxes, you might have 4 different types of capability. You'd have people, organizational, process, information, systems and tooling. So 4 times 12, that's 48 things. It can get quite complex. You can understand why it may be complex to communicate with teams or to communicate with leadership. Okay, what should we be doing next? I get it, we need to be better at this, but where do we start? Well, if you take a dashboard like this, which can be developed from the tool, each of those 12 pizza slices is one of the 12 things that you need to do. And this diagram shows, it gives you some different colors for how well this particular team is doing across people and organization, process or information, and systems or tooling in the piece. And when you get used to the framework, you can begin to have some conversations and go, well, hang on a minute, well, what's going on with our bill of materials? What's happening with our compliance artifacts? We seem to be doing really well with our license compliance and our license obligations, but what do we need to do? And this is where the development planning can come in, and you can say, okay, well, these are the 5 things, which is the gold areas. These are the things that we should be focusing on. Now, this is experience we've had in live action, working with people. But what we'd really like to do with this tool in the future is to continue to work with people using it in practice. And so one of the areas we've been talking about today quite a lot has been the implications of the CRA. So you could imagine doing a heat map which says, well, this is how the CRA creates areas for us to focus on that wheel. What does the CRA do to our policy? What does it need to do to our response? So you could have a conversation with someone and say, well, look, this is what CRA actually means for us. And we'd love to work with a team, a project, as part of the OpenChain Education Working Group, with a team and a project who'd like to try this tool out and come back to us and say, well, this is what happened for us, or this is what we think we should improve this area. This is an open tool. And that's where you can get the tool. So it's on GitHub. If you'd like to go and look at it, we haven't got time to bring it up on the screen, but it's an Excel spreadsheet which gives you a set of questions, and you can give yourself, you could do it in an afternoon, you could give yourself an assessment, or you could do a much more rigorous 1-month exercise or anything else in between. And the point of the tool is sort of giving you a way to think, to structure, and to find a quick way through to, okay, we know we've got something sorted, tick, 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 but we now know we need to move on to these 5 areas. So we'd be really interested in seeing what you think of the tool, and we'd really be really up for any collaboration or suggestions on things that you'd like to see in the tool. So please do join in with the meetings, come participate, or contact us directly. And that is the conclusion of our talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to you, Stephen and Sascha. We do have time for 1-2 questions.
Was it interesting? Yes. Will I have a look at it? For sure, I will. But when I'm thinking about all the things that you've presented, I was thinking, well, how do I sell this to my management?
Yep.
Because the first thing is when I say, okay, we should do more training here and there and there, and I'm responsible for thousands of people, so it will cost a lot of money. And the immediate question will be, Thomas, why should we do this?
Yeah.
So you ask for what could get improved, more facts, how to convince management.
Yeah, yeah. More scary facts. Okay, so one of the reasons we started on this whole journey, we found people getting up to investment milestones. So funders would be saying, okay, we want to get you to stage A funding. And they'd say, we've heard about this open source risk, what are you doing about it? The other side of the coin is people signing major contracts with major customers, and their procurement team turn around and go, we want a warranty and indemnity that there's no open source risk in what you're giving to us. And people then panic. Because you are under pressure, because if you can't answer the question adequately, you're not get the funding milestone. If you can't answer the question, you can't get the contract with your supplier. And we've found that people have had that kind of experience quite a lot. And this is why we sort of developed the model. Going beyond that, and as I was saying, everything that we've been talking about, you can find ways, so as I was saying, the CRA Act or the AI Act or these kind of things, why does it matter to us? How does it affect us? What do we do about it? This tool allows you to break it down into pieces of, okay, do you accept that we have something we need to be good at? Well, this tool will give you a quick snapshot of how good we are today. Do you want to know which 5 things you want to prioritize for the next 12 months? This tool can tell you that, so that you don't have to learn everything as a leader, but this is a tool that will have a consistent framework that will say, okay, we were this good today, and our plan was to get to there. Ask us again in 12 months, did we get there? The other thing, you could talk to your procurement lead, because if you had this kind of issue across your supply chain, I don't know if you're dealing with a supply chain who aren't necessarily providing all you need to be compliant with your open source obligations, then you could use this kind of framework to say, okay, procurement team, put this in your contract, use it, and then they'll have to self-certify that they're actually doing these things. And then when you find out that they're not, you've got a lever to do something about it. So these are all suggestions.
Thank you so much again. We're at time. Thank you, Stephen and Sascha.
Thank you.